Well, beloveds, this month we have 5 Sundays. And what a gift that we get to receive. We get to receive 5 Sundays in the month of November. Life and the way the the folks have set up a calendar, um, is set up in such a way that we are given 5 Sundays in the month of November. And so now we get to receive this fifth Sunday. And how am I receiving it? So we get to also complete the monthly theme. And our monthly theme has been living as compassionate conduits. And as I think about living as compassionate conduits and all of the talks that have been given by this beloved community's ministers, by Reverend Judy Osuna, by Reverend Kevin, and me earlier on this month, we have had lots and lots of spiritual food to digest and to think about. And the way that it tops off today is with the theme of the grateful and cheerful receiver. Now, the topic for today and the theme for today, people usually think about the grateful and cheerful giver, but this one is titled the grateful and cheerful receiver, because often people refer to being a cheerful giver, as is quoted out of 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 through 7. For those of you who are Bible thumpers and who thrive on the food from our Bible, it comes from that scripture of being a cheerful giver. But as you know from the law of circulation, giving and receiving is a reciprocal ebb and flow of yin and yang. When you accept, you are in the flow as God gives itself as each of its incarnating forms. And so today's topic is really about how am I a cheerful and grateful receiver? It has been said that, of course, that giving is better than receiving, but I say hogwash. How is that possible? How is that possible? Our meditation today was around the giving and the receiving. So go ahead and take your last breath and exhale and give your breath to all of life. Go ahead and don't inhale, don't receive. Do not receive, because it's better to give than to receive. Don't you inhale. Don't you inhale. How silly is that? Go ahead and breathe normally and naturally. How silly is it for us to actually think and believe that we can just give and give and give and give without actually being open to receive and grateful for receiving? It's interesting because with the breath, you wouldn't even dream of that, right? Just exhale and then not take in that inhale. And it's the same even with nature. In our meditation today, standing at the beach, don't you know that the ocean rushes in water, but guess what? It pulls just a lot of that right back. It also receives it. It also receives it back. It gives it and it receives it. It gives it and it receives it. And that is the way nature rolls. And if y'all want to be cool with me, y'all just say, hey, giving and receiving, that's how I roll. Go ahead, say that to yourself. Giving and receiving, that's how I roll. That's right. I can hear you from here all the way across the world. Giving and receiving, that's how I roll. Because here's the deal, is giving and receiving is the same coin. And when we block ourselves from receiving, we are blocking of our good. We are blocking the portal, the channel of our good. And many people do that automatically because they have the mindset that it is better to give than it is to receive. And yet that lie has been spread in such a way that we think we got to give without actually receiving for ourselves. Now, what if everybody were a giver and nobody were a receiver? Could we really give? Like, I want to give you so much, but if you're not open to receiving it, I have all the stuff that I want to give. But if everybody's trying to give me, and I'm not receiving and you're not receiving, then it doesn't work. And so what I'd like to do is actually just kind of dive into a little bit, just kind of scratch the surface at the mindset around blocking our good and why we may not want to receive. Now, many of you may say, hey, get out of my diary. How do you know that about me? Believe me, I haven't been reading your diary or your mail or anything like that. However, because of our human experience and because we've been in this teaching for such a long time, what I might suggest is that sometimes for some of us, the lack of being open and receptive comes from fear. Now, many of you might go, wait a minute, why would I be afraid to receive? Why would I be afraid to receive? Well, with that mindset of being afraid to receive, there's a lot of responsibility in receiving. Once I say yes to something and I now have it, I am now responsible for it and possibly accountable for it. Sometimes the idea of being the receiver is also this idea of vulnerability or having fear of being vulnerable. If I accept this, what does this mean about me? Does it mean that I can't provide for myself, that I don't have enough, that I'm not enough, that I am now opening myself up to criticism? Am I afraid of vulnerability? Am I afraid to receive because it might put me in a position to be vulnerable? Sometimes the person who receives in our society today is seen as weak. I might not want to ask for help and receive help because I might be perceived as being weak or incapable. Now, I don't know if that's touching a chord with any of you. If it is, you can go ahead and type in the chat what fear of receiving might mean for you. What I want to actually dive into then on a second layer is that why is it that we have that fear in the first place? Vulnerability is actually the place of innovation. Vulnerability is actually the place of creativity. Vulnerability is actually the place where we actually are one. because it also gives the person giving an opportunity to become one with us as the receiver. It completes the yin and the yang. But as we dive a little bit deeper into the fear of vulnerability or the fear of receiving, we actually then uncover that the only reason why we have the fear in the first place is because we are not fully relying on God. I'll say that again. The only reason we have that fear in the first place is only because we are not fully relying upon God. We're not fully relying upon good. We are not fully relying upon the one power, the one presence, the one life that has created everything out of itself. Therefore, its life is our very life. In other words, or to put it plainly, we believe in separation. Woo! We are believing in separation, and we are believing in separation so deeply and so profoundly that we think that somebody else is actually giving to us, when in fact, when we are anchored and steeped in our oneness and in the knowing that we are not separate and could never ever be separate from the power and the presence that has created us, we're simply just accepting what is already our birthright. So in other words, I could actually be seeing that my giving is God giving onto itself, and my receiving is God giving onto itself. It's just kind of like even the Native Americans, our First Nation people, had this thing about, no, this is our tool and we use it. Everybody uses it. And oh, this person and this person might use it and use it. So when we're using it, it is actually just God's giving this onto itself. That term, that pejorative term, Indian giver, is no such thing. I mean, this doesn't belong to us. This is all God, and we're simply circulating it. It is part of the ebb and the flow. Hello. When you give to me, I can now say, wow, this is actually God giving of itself. This is the way that the allness of God just gets to be with me for a little while. How amazing is that? How amazing it is that when we think about even our finances, like, wow, we want to be great receivers then, don't we? But if we have this fear of separation, and if we have this fear that I am not one with source itself, then I think that it's charity and that someone's giving to me, that someone outside of me is giving to me. But what it is in actuality is that it is just returning onto me for my benefit and my growth. And guess what? When I receive and I have an abundance, and I have because I allow myself to receive, I now take a portion of what I've been given and I share it with others freely, effortlessly. That is the nature of receiving. Being a grateful and cheerful receiver. To see the smile on someone's face when they actually give, and I joyously and gratefully and cheerfully receive. That's what makes giving so amazing. I mean, can you imagine a grumpy receiver? Oh, here, I have this great gift for you. I've been thinking about you so much. Oh, well, I don't really want it. Oh, not really. You really shouldn't have. You shouldn't have. And just grumpy. It just takes the joy out of giving. But the joy of receiving, the cheerfulness, being a grateful and cheerful receiver, recognizing that all of this is not in a human form technically ours. This is the gift of life itself, giving unto itself, and it is simply circulating. You know, when we were on that beach just a moment ago in the meditation, the water doesn't say, oh no, don't touch Sunshine's feet. She's a grumpy receiver. Oh no, don't touch over there. No, the ocean just ebbs and flows. It gives and it receives. It gives and it receives. And the only times that we are that we block our flow of receiving, how is it that we can be grateful and cheerful givers if we're not also grateful and cheerful receivers? We got to know that it is the oneness. It is in our oneness that we're actually just simply in divine circulation. And the only times that we're not in divine circulation is when we think and when we believe in separation. And when we're not simply fully relying on the goodness of life, on the allness of life, on the good of God. And when I say God, remember, beloveds, that I'm not talking about some deity up in the sky that's like dispensing and making it rain upon us. Make it rain, make it rain. Did I go there? Yeah, I did. Okay. Well, you know, that's not what I'm talking about when I say God. When I say God, I'm talking about this living spirit, this energetic, this life force, this divine order. This divine order that can only give of itself, and it can only give and receive. That is the nature. That is the nature and the circulation of life. When we exhale, our quote unquote exhale, our waste, is exactly what plants need in order to take that in. And it does what it does in plants. And then what do plants do? They give off oxygen. That's why saving the rainforest and having greenery and having parks and in various places is so important for the oxygen flow. That as we exhale, there is a receiver there of our exhale, taking it in and doing what it does. And then as it exhales, as the plants, as living form exhales, we're right there. We're right there to go, oxygen is so good. It's necessary for living. It absolutely is. But if I'm not receiving that in-breath, if I'm not receiving that oxygen, then I am not fully living. And it is the same with all of life. As our Leadership Council chair says, the abundance is real. It is real. It is present everywhere. And so our job is to actually begin to decrease the amount of separation that we believe in until it is gone. In other words, if I believe in this much separation through my spiritual and daily practices, as I begin to decrease my belief in separation, as I begin to decrease this idea that there is an other, there is no other. That is my other me, if you will, right? Remember the one poem that I talked about, that you are my other me? And so when you give to me, since you are my other me and I am your other you, then it's simply the ebb and the flow. And if we were to only follow nature in that way, and get our bloated nothingness out of the way, thinking that, oh, I have so much, I'm going to give, I'm going to give, I'm going to give from this exalted position, as if those receiving are not also in that same exalted position. That's where we have challenge and discord and the cognitive dissonance. So, beloveds, it's important to recognize that vulnerability is that place of creativity and innovation. That fear actually stands for face everything and recover. Face everything and recover your true self. That there is nothing, no thing that separates your life from the life of living spirit. And that if by chance there is opportunities for giving and receiving, then be a grateful and cheerful receiver and allow the giver the joy of giving. And remember that it doesn't make you vulnerable or weak because you are receiving. You are actually in a power position because you get, by receiving, you get to put a smile on somebody's face who is actually doing the giving. And because you receive, then now you have, and you have an opportunity to then also give. And then you want that receiver to also be a joyous, cheerful, and grateful receiver. Giving and receiving are the same coin. And so our practice this week is to release the old ideas of receiving as being weak or being in a vulnerable state, and actually anchor in that by participating in receiving, which we do already, but by consciously participating in receiving, we're actually contributing to the allness of life. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourselves if you're on Zoom. If you're on Facebook, I'm going to ask you to type in with capital letters a YES. But are you now willing and ready to be a grateful and cheerful receiver?
Yes.
I need
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, I am. Yes.
See, yes. And so it is. And so
it is.
it shall be.
Yes.
Go forth, beloveds, and be cheerful and grateful receivers. Let's end with this affirmation. Besides the one affirmation that I gave you, I give and receive, and that's how I roll. This is a little more tame, right? As I give and I receive, I know the river of life flows through me, and my mind and heart open to greater good. It is so, and so it is. Go forth and multiply this consciousness, beloveds.